We continue to show you our dedication to protecting our water, willing to literally go the extra mile for it. I went to the Chesapeake Bay last week to find out the state of Maryland is on a pollution diet, something leaders in the Lake Erie region might want to pay attention to. It's a story you'll see only on 11. This is Sandy Point State Park in Annapolis, Maryland, and behind me a beautiful beach, the Chesapeake Bay and the Bay Bridge. Now they don't get their drinking water from here like Toledo does from Lake Erie, but the quality of life here depends on how clean the water is. The Chesapeake Bay looks like a postcard at every corner, an amazing place to watch a sunset or kick off your shoes for a walk on the beach. But there's also the fast-paced side of the bay. If you have a boat here, you will have friends. You can cruise out to the Bay Bridge and enjoy the view for miles. But just like we've seen on Lake Erie, blue-green algae has been sickening the Chesapeake Bay for years and threatening its famous blue crab industry.
It's very important to Marylanders. It's a significant driver in terms of our economy. We have commercial fisheries, we have recreational fisheries, tourism.
Lee Curry of the Maryland Department of Environment tells us the state is committed to improving the bay's health by following pollution limits made mandatory by the EPA in 2010. 6 states in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, plus Washington, D.C., have to meet a total maximum daily load for phosphorus and nitrogen that gets into the bay. Curry says Maryland is targeting the biggest sources of algae, runoff from agriculture, and wastewater by managing erosion from its farm fields, controlling urban stormwater runoff, and upgrading wastewater treatment plants. In fact, Maryland residents have to pay a $5 a month fee on each month's sewer bill for the Bay Restoration Fund. Commercial and industrial users pay too. The money pays for upgrades to 67 major wastewater treatment plants.
That's a significant accomplishment. And what we've been able to do through that is actually document, if you reduce loads from this plant, we're seeing and measuring water quality benefits in the waters adjacent to it.
To measure its progress, Maryland has set up monitors in its rivers to look at the phosphorus levels. Leaders here in Maryland say that the reduction efforts here on Chesapeake Bay are already paying off. That 2013 data shows that they have reached 41% of their nitrogen reduction goals and 61% of their goals for reducing phosphorus loading. They have several more years to get to 100% reduction. That ultimate goal must be reached by 2025. Aquatic biologist Chris Luckett took us out on the Chesapeake so we could see for ourselves. He says the phosphorus and nitrogen reduction measures are working.
We investigate fish kills, so we're intimately involved with harmful algae bloom and the effects of algae. We average about 120 fish kills a year in Maryland. The last 4 years or so, we've probably averaged about 80.
I happened to be up near Baltimore Harbor 2 weeks ago, and I asked a gentleman the same question. He'd been on the water since a kid. I said, do you see a measurable difference? And he said, actually, I do. He's like, the water looks a lot cleaner. Up next, we drive over the Bay Bridge into Delaware. They do not have a shore on the Chesapeake Bay, but also have to do their part to keep it clean. In Annapolis, Maryland, I'm Tim Miller. Well, more now on how we're finding new ways to protect our water. Last night at 6, I went out on Chesapeake Bay in Maryland to see how they're making progress in reducing their algae bloom threat. Tonight, we take you to Delaware. Only on 11, the unique ways they are keeping contaminated water out of the bay. This may look like an ordinary farm field in southern Delaware, but by the time this corn is harvested in the next couple of weeks, there will already be a winter cover crop growing here. Why? Because of this big thing called the air seeder. Jay Baxter is proud of the soybeans and corn growing on his large farm in Georgetown, Delaware. He's keeping the watershed clean by limiting the fertilizer and phosphorus that runs into nearby ditches and streams. He gladly welcomed the air seeder to the farm. It actually came from Northwest Ohio, from Buckeye Soil Solutions in Ada. And this is the first one used on the East Coast. Arms fold out on both sides, and several nozzles spray seed down between existing crops. The air seeder is planting radish seeds. Farmers like Jay no longer have to wait until their main crops are harvested to plant cover crops.
I've got some cover crop that we did about close to 3 weeks ago. Now it's already up. So it's already there for benefit.
It's already established and doing its thing.
The cover crops will help keep the fertilizer in the ground and out of the watershed. Less fuel to feed algae blooms in the Chesapeake Bay. This air seeder has been used in 20 Delaware fields since mid-July, and farmers get paid an incentive of $60 for every acre. This farm in nearby Greenwood is also protecting the Chesapeake. Students in Woodbridge High School's Future Farmers of America Animal Science program are learning water quality techniques. A manure shed was built to store the cow's waste.
If you had a big rain and that just sat on the ground, it could end up in that ditch over there.
Right. Could run into the ditch, could be run down through the groundwater, any of those things. And
it goes to the Chesapeake Bay.
And it all goes to the Chesapeake Bay, yep.
It's keeping clean water clean.
We were also shown a gutter system on this big barn. Rainwater is diverted from the roof around the building and to a storm drain.
If we didn't have the rain gutter situation, all of this water would come off this roof, enter into the sacrifice area, which contains animal waste.
They also have rain gardens that absorb contaminants from the farm and the high school's parking lot. Practices like these have put Delaware on a target for meeting its 2017 federal requirements of reducing 60% of the phosphorus and nitrogen that drains into the Chesapeake.
Everybody here in Delaware recognizes that our agricultural community is part of the solution, and they're willing to make those investments.
Now, the students over at Woodbridge High actually won a Governor's Association Conservation Award for their farm this past April. And tomorrow night at 6, will these water cleanup methods in Delaware and Maryland work right here in Northwest Ohio? And is there a willingness to take these steps? Could Lake Erie's algae problem be solved by another large body of water some 500 miles away? The last 2 nights, we've shown you how Maryland and Delaware are cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay. Tonight, we investigate if those measures can work here, and if they're not happening already, why not? Here's my story tonight. A year after Toledo's drinking water crisis and another large algae bloom in Lake Erie this summer, laws have been proposed, some passed, to control farm runoff, but a lot of talk of change. The talk about improving water quality in the Chesapeake Bay turned into action in 2010 when the U.S. EPA forced 6 surrounding states and Washington, D.C. to cut back the amount of pollutants they were sending into the watershed and the bay. It was a specific mandatory plan to restore the national treasure to health. We showed you that Maryland requires residents to pay $60 a year to pay for wastewater treatment plant upgrades and has targeted pollutants from wastewater and agricultural runoff, helping the state exceed expectations for its phosphorus reduction goals.
The Chesapeake Bay is a mix of salt water and fresh water, obviously much different than Lake Erie. But these leaders here at the Maryland Department of Environment believe that Lake Erie leaders can learn a lot from what they're doing here.
We made sure that we had consistent.
Lee Curry is one of the state of Maryland's experts on cleaning up the bay. He told us it won't happen overnight, but change can happen on the Great Lakes.
You need to start with sound science. You need to start with sound information to begin to show here's the problem. And I think you guys have done that. You've collected some information in terms of here's what the problem is.
The cleanup efforts in neighboring Delaware could also help Lake Erie. They're using the air seeder to plant winter crops before the fall harvest, and they're using smart practices to keep rainwater away from animal waste on farms.
The biggest thing is don't be afraid to try, and most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Lake Erie waterkeeper Sandy Bin says it's a shame the Chesapeake Bay's restoration efforts aren't being used here because they would work.
We don't have the accountability, we don't have the overall plan, so people just take a stab at where they think things should be done without any overall numbers of where the nutrients are coming from.
Bin says the Maryland and Delaware projects could show where the phosphorus is coming from and where it's getting into Lake Erie, and could lead to real reductions to clean up the water.
Let's quit beating around the bush, and let's get the job done, and let's get the lake healed, and let's enjoy it again, where we don't have to worry about whether we can swim in it or drink the water.
And Ben says it is time for the U.S. EPA to order daily load limits for Lake Erie and for Governors Kasich and Snyder in Ohio and Michigan to push for these projects. Even the president, she says. We will have all three of our reports from the Chesapeake plus a slideshow at ToledoNewsNow.com.